We are going live.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Angie Atkinson, and I'm here with the lovely and talented Dana Morningstar. Dana, welcome back.
Yes. Hello, Angie. It's been a while.
Yes.
Yes, since we've been live. So I'm glad we were able to connect and do this today.
Yes, me too. Yeah, it's been a while. Both of us have been busy, and I'm not sure exactly all the details. We're working on that, but life gets busy sometimes. So what has been happening with you this last...
Gosh, you know what? My life has just been absolutely crazy and stressful. It's nothing positive. So I think you've had more positive, great experiences, if I understand correctly. So how about let's talk about that?
It's been a crazy few weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. There's just a lot going on in life in general. Lots of little changes and things that are happening around my world, and I'm working on that. So I think mostly we are back, and here we are. So we hello. Let me just say hello to a few people here.
Okay.
Hello, Lanky, Julia, up 3. TTU, I don't know how to say that. Tattoo, maybe. Karina, Mary, Andrea, Little Miss Charmmaker, Nancy, Nikki. Hey, everybody. Denali, hello. So today we are not coming in with a very specific topic because we know that everybody has lots of questions because we have been kind of out for a while. Hello, Lisa, Judy, Arlene, Annabelle, Mark, Pam, Laura. Angela, hello everybody. I did come across one article, and I guess we'll just kind of start with that. Hello, Shannon and Shauna, Crystal. There is a therapist on Psychology Today whose name, I'm sorry, I don't know if she's a therapist. She's a PhD, Eleanor Greenberg, and I actually really like her work. She came out with this article recently, a couple days ago, 3 days ago, talking about the treatment of narcissistic personality disorder. And she says, a lot of people say it can't be done, but here's the way it can be done. And she kind of goes into 10 different steps about that. And she implies that many people like myself come out and say, well, they can't be treated. And I guess there are people who say they can't be treated. I have always said they can potentially, I mean, hypothetically, they could be treated, but it would require a large amount of commitment on the part of the narcissist as well as the part of the therapist. She does note that it would take 5 to 10 years minimum of continued therapy to treat the narcissist. And of course, again, it all comes back down to the fact that most narcissists don't want therapy, and there aren't a lot of therapists or psychologists trained in NPD. Dana, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's just really important for people that are in relationships with toxic people of any kind to just get really clear on, if you're holding on to hope, hope can just drag you through hell. Yeah. And so it's really important to get clear on where your boundaries are. If you're going to try to get into couples counseling or get your partner into counseling, to get really clear on what kind of changes that you would need to see made and in what time frame. And how much time and money are you willing to shovel at this? Because therapy in general only has about a 50% success rate. So if even that. So, and that's with people that are not personality disordered. So it's a challenge. And, I think a lot of people just don't have realistic expectations when it comes to therapy. They tend to really think they're going to see major changes in 3 to 5 sessions. And depending on the issue, they might. But when you're talking personality disordered stuff, it's a long uphill climb because it's not just one thing. If you go into therapy for, like, I don't know, grief or something, they're surrounding a death, like there's a specific thing, or time management, or anger or something. It's that kind of, and even then it's not one thing, it's all interrelated, right? But personality stuff, it's interwoven and it comes out in a multitude of ways. And I just encourage people to figure out where your line in the sand is. Cause I know you and I, Angie, feel the same about this kind of advice. Is people it can really feed into that false hope that people have, and it can lead to them being killed. It can lead to them staying in really dangerous situations, thinking, well, this person wants to be in therapy, or they're wanting to, or they're not a narcissist. They're they're borderline, or they're bipolar, or they have some sort of other diagnosis, but they're working on it. And if a person is dangerous or destructive, and especially if they've ever been violent or intimidating, that's some pretty major stuff that's really difficult for a person to come back from, and you're risking your health and your sanity by staying in that relationship. So
it's true. Yeah, you have to have boundaries. You have to have, and it's so difficult because, we love these people at some point, right? And it's so very difficult to say, that's it, it's over, especially when you are whether it's a family member or it's a spouse or a partner, if you have any shared anything, whether we're talking about shared family or shared stuff, children, whatever, it's difficult. But, like Dana said, it's so important to know your limits, and to, hope is great, but you can't change other people who don't want, and you can't help someone who doesn't want help. So just keep it in mind and be careful when you read things like that. Not because we think that, Eleanor Greenberg is awesome. I love a lot of her stuff. She's very, she knows the disorder, but I think this article in particular is a little dangerous.
I agree. And I think really when you're talking about, I always wonder what various mental health professionals consider narcissism, because I've seen a range of people ranging from just annoying and self-centered to outright, violent and dangerous and dictators, and, really, really, I think that's the part that's missing. So we're using one word to encapsulate this whole spectrum. Yeah. And that's part of the confusion with all of this, because I've known a couple of narcissists that have been diagnosed with NPD in my life that have been on the pales in comparison to what we talk about here on these channels.
Right.
Really on the mild end, but it's not livable because it's all about them all of the time. And it's just, that's still not workable. Right. And I think too, for mental health professionals, it's not even just narcissism that they need to understand. It's emotional and psychological abuse. And those concepts are oftentimes not put together. The focus is on narcissism as selfishness and grandiosity and arrogance and lack of remorse and these kinds of things. But that the abusive component is often not discussed or linked. And that's the result of grandiosity and arrogance and selfishness and all of that. But it's so.
Yeah. And it all comes down, in my opinion, the point at which, I believe everybody has a certain amount of narcissism, because at its base, at its purest meaning, narcissism is just self-interest. But when we get to the point that it becomes toxic, we see that lack of empathy. That's the common linking factor, in my opinion, for all of the types of toxic narcissists, is that they don't care how you feel. They don't feel how you feel. They can understand how you feel if they choose to, but mostly they don't choose to. They just act from a place of no empathy. They sort of act like either you're an extension of themselves or you're not a whole person or a real person. And I think that's what makes them so cruel in their various types of abuse. What do you think about that?
Yeah. They feel justified and entitled. Right. And when anybody feels justified and entitled, when anybody feels like they are right, we don't have empathy for the other person. And that's the problem because like you were saying, Angie, narcissism is just a personality trait. We all have it. And to a certain point, it's healthy, but it's when it gets to that point of past healthy, where it's this, malignant self-absorption, and that causes this lack of empathy and all of that. That's really damaging for anybody that's emotionally involved with a person like that, because they're just not able to be there. And so.
Absolutely. You ready to jump in the chat?
I sure am.
Okay. I've got one here from Brian, who wants to know, he says, how do do narcissistic people as they age start to look horrible? I have a theory. Two narcissists I know never would eat vegetables. Is there any connection between narcissism and diet? I would say in general, no. But with that being said, I would say in general, I mean, I know narcissists who are like total health freaks, you know what I mean? So, but I also know narcissists who are alcoholics who eat whatever's in front of them. So, I mean, I don't think that is necessarily a key, but I do think that someone who doesn't eat healthy probably has a higher chance of being psychologically affected by what they're eating. And I know that sounds weird, but what I mean is, not only are we thinking on the outside, on the surface, they're looking at themselves in the mirror and they're feeling like they're sort of collapsing, the collapsed narcissist thing. They're looking different than they used to look, whatever. But we know that certain types of food, certain types of additives in food psychologically affect us, affect our behavior, our mood, our ability to feel happy, all of those things. So I do think there's a possibility of their cruelty might increase, or their anger, or their frustration based on what they're eating. But outside of that, no, I don't see any personally, I don't think there's a direct connection, but I could definitely see how what they're eating might make them less nice to be around. Thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. I could totally see that. I think for so many of us, diet does play. I mean, it's the fuel you put in your vehicle, right? Like it's
Right.
fuel you put in your body. And especially for anybody that has struggles with blood sugar issues, or hormonal imbalances, if you don't eat nourishing foods, then you're not going to feel good.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, normally it's more of like a, narcissism. It's just kind of a nature and nurture thing that develops through, a wide variety of reasons. I really think a lot of it's because just how to be, manners and how to get along in society, and all of that stuff is becoming a lost art. It's just not taught. And I think a lot of what we consider personality disorders could really be minimized if there was more of a push to teach emotional health starting at a young age.
I agree.
Because nobody knows. No, I mean, you figure this stuff out the hard way, with, everything, not even just them. I mean, you think about us, like the imbalance with boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and getting, what's reasonable and unreasonable in a relationship, and what is a healthy relationship, and all of this stuff. And because everybody is walking around with this skewed idea of, what's quote unquote normal, or what's even healthy. And it's easy to get tangled up into situations that cause more and more pain. And then that's going to lead to all kinds of issues, PTSD and anxiety and depression. And, it's like, if you didn't start off with a mental health challenge of some sort, odds are you're going to end up with one, because if you don't understand how to navigate your environment effectively, it's just, you're going to come across enough pain that it's going to be damaging.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. 100%. Do you have one for us, or do you want me to bring up the next one I have here?
Here, I've got one from Moniki Blessed, who says, I recently heard the term friends with benefits. Why would a woman in particular agree to such an agreement? Please help me. Please help me to understand this. Is this a creation of narcissistic men? What do you think?
I think it is a creation of necessity for some people, and that sounds really weird. I don't think all people involved in these types of relationships are narcissists. I think what happens is maybe somebody is at a point in their life when they need, to not be in a relationship because either they've just been in one, or they're just not ready, or they're trying to build their career, whatever it might be. And I think that there can be such a thing as a healthy friends with benefits relationship. With that being said, I think it's very difficult for empaths to be involved in these unless they are truly friends with benefits. And what I mean is, I've seen empaths successfully do this with a monogamy situation where they don't live together. It's basically almost like lightly dating, but but they're friends, you know. So I don't think it's a terrible thing. I know I know that's shocking, but I think in situations where both partners are aware of what they're doing and agreeing that this is what they're doing, and I think if there is a monogamy factor there, not because they're committed to each other, but diseases and all the yucky stuff that comes with promiscuity, I think it's a good way for people who aren't ready to be in relationships to sort of have certain needs met if they can't just go the old-fashioned way with the, you know, the toy or whatever, out of control. But my point is, I do think, I think it's something that I know that it's been going on since at least the time I was in college, which is, you know, a long time ago. But anyway, I also, I'm sure before that even, but I also know that in our current, with the millennial type people of the younger generation, they have whole apps for this sort of thing where they, you know, hookup apps and things like that. It's just like, I think that, I think intimacy has been discounted in our current society pretty significantly. And so while I've seen healthy friends with benefits things, I've seen friends with benefits work for some people, I think it's very difficult for an empath to do it because we get attached, and it's not enough for us many times. And I wouldn't recommend it unless both parties are in on what is happening, because what I see a lot of times with friends with benefits is one person thinks they're building up to a relationship and the other person thinks it's friends with benefits. So that doesn't work. But I think if all parties are informed and agree on what is happening and are able to stick to it without falling in love, okay, but I don't think that's really that possible. Anyway, bottom line, I think it's been normalized in our current society by the internet, by these apps, by younger people. But I think it's always been around. And I don't know that it's necessarily a narcissism thing, but I think certainly narcissists would enjoy relationships like that because they get the benefits without having to commit. Thoughts?
Yeah, although I will say the two real sociopathic men in my life, ironically, were all about commitment because they wanted other people commit me, and I'm sure many other people committed to them.
Yep.
And because that tripped me up for the longest time. I'm like, why wouldn't you just go and have casual sex with people? Like there's people there's people out there that are looking for friends with benefits and that are looking for no strings attached. So why would you do all this? Why would you go to such great lengths to try to convince me that you were serious when you totally weren't? Like that took me a long time to wrap my mind around, but that's so, yeah, but you know, like Angie was saying, the friends with benefits thing, I think intimacy really has been a discounted thing in our society. And I agree that the vast majority of the time there's somebody that has stronger feelings than the other. Mm-hmm. And these situations can just lead to a lot of kind of hurt and heartache. Mm-hmm. So it's just, you know, get clear with what you want and just keep that communication with others, I think, is what's important.
Yeah. And on that same note, I've had, you know, clients come in and say, well, I'm not ready for a relationship, but I'm really missing physical touch. And there are things you can do outside of actually going out and doing that, of course.
Yeah.
But again, if both parties agree, then maybe it's okay. With that being said, there are massages, and I don't mean the weird kind. I mean the normal, healthy kind. You know, there are lots of things. You know, you can hug your kids, hug your cat, your dog, whatever. There are things you can do to still get that human touch without actually going out and, you know, randomly hooking up with people.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think my concern when people are out of a toxic relationship and they're like, boy, you know what? I'm just really lonely. I miss sleeping next to somebody. I miss all these things, and I just really kind of want to I just need a warm body, basically. Because, you know, sex, especially with women, we release a lot of oxytocin. Men release it too, but I've heard that they only release it when they're in love, interestingly enough, or large quantities of it when they're in love. So they don't release, which makes sense biologically, I guess. But anyways, so for women, sex is a very bonding thing for us, even if we don't intend for it to be. It is. And my concern would be if a person starting a relationship with somebody that they really don't like, other than the fact that person's a warm body, mm-hmm. that they're going to end up having feelings for yet another wrong person for them. So,
yeah. It's a
yeah.
valid point. And that's why I would, most of the time I would discourage it. I mean, I have,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to go into any major details, but I do have like at least one client right now who is kind of trying out the different things. And I think she has found that she gets a lot of inappropriate photos, to say the very least. But you know, you gotta, it's like if you go into those types of apps, you kind of like going into the, you know, the outlet mall and digging through the bargain bin, you know. So you're
Yeah.
gonna have to go through a lot of crap to find the real thing. So something to
Yeah.
think about. You
And
know.
then I think too, to realize with online dating, the percentage of people out there that are lying is very, very high. So
Yes.
especially on these like sex only type sites, you've got a lot of married people out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to go slow and just be discerning and kind of not take people at face value. Like you've really got to Google them. You've got to meet with them a few times and just not get emotionally invested right away. Because I feel like anymore, that's the norm more so than the exception.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen all kinds of stuff online. People saying, "Oh, well, you know, my wife has cancer and she's okay with me, you know, having sex with other women." And, you know, we're a poly couple, but then they're really not, or that, just all kinds of stuff. So just don't, you know, just proceed with caution,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a thing.
And know your boundaries and know what it is and isn't acceptable to you, and don't allow like a hot person or a good looking person to fool you, because we kind of talked
Yeah.
about this a little before, but you know, by nature, our human nature is, something with our brain anyway. I'm not going to go into all of it, but the way that we perceive people is if they are attractive, if they are symmetrical, if they are, you know, physically fit, etc., we automatically assume that they are nicer than we do if they are less physically fit, less symmetrical, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, and that's not obviously always true, but it's something that we just naturally see, and it has to do with natural selection and choosing people for who are good mates or whatever. But it's not even just about people of the opposite sex. So just be aware of that, when you're thinking about things.
And I would say just one more thing. You know, because it is so easy for us to confuse niceness with goodness or attractiveness with goodness. And there are so many just predators online out there. There's just all kinds of stuff going on out there. It's just, I would just strongly encourage, do not meet anybody at your house or at their house, at least for like the first 6 or 7 dates.
100%.
Because you just don't know. There's human trafficking going on. There's abusive people. And, you know, I was going to say, I don't mean to, you know, instill fear, but yeah, actually I do. Like,
Yeah.
I do mean to instill fear, because this is a very real thing and it's growing. So you just have to proceed with caution, and you can't undo it. Once you tell somebody your address or they're at your house,
that's it.
Now what? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I would say be really careful, because even once you do get, like, say, okay, well, we're going to meet in this coffee shop or whatever. Well, then maybe you hang out all afternoon and you feel great. You really like this person, you totally trust and feel like they're okay. Then you go back to their place, and next thing you know, you wake up in some country somewhere else being a slave of some sort or whatever. I mean, I'm not going to, but that, it's not like that hasn't happened. I mean, it has happened to lots of, probably thousands of people over the years. So, I mean, on the plus side, they usually aren't looking for people who are my age, but you never know.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with, you know, sex trafficking, is you really don't know. I think there's this idea out there that they're only after, you know, super hot 20-year-olds, and they're not. It's men, women, and it's all age, children, all ages. And, kind of as a side note, I came across a really disturbing video the other night about sex trafficking and cruise ships, which again, normal, decent people don't think about this kind of stuff. And it's so important that we're aware of it. But they were saying that over the past, I forget how many years, but hundreds of women have gone missing on cruise ships. And what they're thinking is going on is that sex traffickers are paying staff on cruise ships to point out, and then they will befriend somebody, you know, oh, you're really into jazz, so am I. We should go to this club when we, you know, get to the port. And then they go off with this person who they think they have this amazing connection with, and then they're never seen again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, in this day and age, it's terrifying, but you just got to let people know where you're going. It's not being overcautious. It's just being reasonable in this
Yeah.
day and age.
Yeah.
So
And don't assume that it can't happen to you, because I used to be that girl that was always
yeah,
thinking things couldn't happen to me, and it turns out they could. So just be aware of that.
yeah.
Okay, I have another one for us.
Okay.
Lulu
And then
says,
I
oh,
have
what were
one
you going to
after you.
say?
I have
Okay.
one after you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Lulu says, please talk about how to parent children of narcissistic abuse. And we have gone no contact. So both trauma recovery plus grieving the loss of the parent. I think she's implying that she and the children have gone no contact with the parent, which in my opinion on this would just simply be, obviously educate them about what they dealt with, educate them about having empathy. I need to know the ages of the children. But certainly, grieving the loss of the parent is necessary. I don't know how legally acceptable it is to go no contact unless you have, with as far as the children going no contact, unless they're over the age of 18 or you have some kind of custody agreement that would indicate that maybe it's due to a crime that this person committed or whatever. But yeah, you have to let them, of course, grieve the loss. You want to make sure, to watch for those little signs of narcissism, because unfortunately, depending on how they process things, they may go, the way of being a codependent or the way of being a narcissist. So either way, you need to work on teaching empathy and teaching tolerance and things like that. But I would say outside of that, just be there for them. Make sure you validate their feelings and their thoughts about the other parent. Make sure to give them the attention that they need during this time. Maybe take them to a counselor or a therapist or a coach. Probably in the case of children, I would look at someone who is qualified specifically to talk to children, because that sometimes makes a difference. Teenagers and above can go to the same therapist or coach that you use if they, in most cases, as long as they don't have other issues. So Dana, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. Depending on the ages of the children, play therapy can be great, art therapy, music therapy. As far as doing, what you can do at home. You can even incorporate some of that into your home. Having your child, again, depending on the ages, drawing pictures, explaining the picture to you, it kind of gives you an insight into their emotional world and what their struggles are. Letting the child know that that they can talk to you about anything that's going on, and that I think for a lot of children, regardless of the age, they feel uncomfortable talking about one parent to the other. So that can kind of be a challenge. So letting them know that it's okay and just validating them. Yes, I'm sorry, that was really hurtful. It's really unfortunate that we have to go through this, and I know it's not right and it's not fair. And letting them know, if the other parent, if they don't have contact with them, that it's not a reflection of the child, that there's continually pointing out specific things that are good and right about that child. Oh, you know what? You're so creative. You're such a good friend. You're such a good listener. You're so organized. Pointing out specific traits about that child, letting them, just building that self-esteem on a regular basis, and expecting there's going to most likely be behavior changes whenever there's any type of stress in a child's life, especially you've got two major things going on. So realizing that children, even adults, frankly, we often lack the vocabulary to effective and the emotional intelligence to explain what's going on. And so it just comes out as anger. So when you see these anger outbursts, I think try to approach it with more compassion and empathy, and figure out what's going on, what's driving this, and to see if you can sit down with your child and talk about these things. There's different games and stuff you can find on Amazon for like board games and stuff that are kind of like quote unquote therapy games for getting to know your children. There's a lot of like question and answer games. I would encourage also routine, because children again, we all need this, but like children especially do well when they're in chaos, if they can have routine. So routine is the opposite of chaos. So doing things in a predictable way, more often than not, having dinner at the same time, maybe making it a point to eat dinner as a family, with you and your child, turning off the TV, being present and engaged, asking them questions. Some of my favorite ones that are really interesting to see what kids come up with. It's, we just used to call it high low. So, what was the high point of your day to day? And then what was the low point of your day to day and why? And then everybody going around the table. Yeah. And that can give you a lot of insight into what's going on with everybody. Yeah.
All good points.
Yeah. Yep. Here's a question I have from TTT000 who says, does speaking out about your story with abuse attract more narcissists into your life attacking you?
I mean, I, of course, have had plenty of commenters who have complained about a number of things. Certain videos I've done have certainly drawn out the narcissists. But I think in general, people don't want you to be someone who's educated. If they're a narcissist and they see you seeing them, and what I mean is by, able to see through them and point out their behaviors. I mean, people don't generally come to me and try to manipulate me. I mean, those who do, I'm kind of offended by it because I'm like, don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I do for a living? And that sounds kind of weird to say it like that, but it shocks me when they don't know that, or when they know me and they still try to do it to me. But if they don't, I wouldn't say more so. No, personally. What about yourself?
I mean, on a personal level, yeah. And the reason, at least at first, not so much anymore, for everything Angie's saying, I agree with 100%. But at first I was getting a lot of people, because I think a lot of narcissists honestly do feel they're the victim.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all about them all the time. And so I was getting a lot of problematic people kind of messaging me out of the blue, that were like acquaintances that I'd known for a long time, that had this story. Oh, this is what happened. Like, my ex was so awful to me and this, that, and the other. And I know a bigger part of the story, and it was very obviously one-sided. And so you have to be careful. But I think anybody that's sharing their story, survivors commonly will want to do this, understandably so. They'll put it online. And when people are very open about uncomfortable topics that aren't normally discussed, it tends to bring out a lot of discomfort in others. And so potentially other family members or friends will try to silence them. And granted, there is kind of a time and place, for sharing certain information. But it can really bring out a lot of anger and hostility in other people, especially if you're talking about somebody who's died or who's a family member. People can definitely go on the attack. If you're talking about, your ex specifically, their friends and family might go on the attack. So yeah, I think, I guess the bottom line, I think it's to think about, who all is seeing when you're talking about your experience, who all is seeing this, and what could the ripple effects be? And are you potentially okay with that? Because it really can mean a lot of other people end up cutting contact.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I saw something I wanted to, okay. I have one. Here it is. Is it my turn to bring one, or is it your turn?
Sure. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Lori Ramsey says, after being in a relationship for more than 20 years, my biggest regret is I allow my children to go through this. As I get healthy, how do I help my children become healthy adults? So I think she's saying she allowed them to go through it and she feels guilty about that. And I think that's pretty normal to feel that way. But I would just ask you to not, number one, we cannot change the past. So stop beating yourself up about it. You didn't know then what you know now. And you probably thought at that time that you were doing the best you could do. And you were at that time. So that's the first thing, is to stop beating yourself up. Be okay with what it is now. You've left that person now, I think. And if you haven't, okay, you can still help your kids in some ways. Again, the same thing I said before, and this is true for adult children as well. Validation is really important. So when they say to you, you know, dad XYZ, don't say, but your dad loves you. Everything's okay. Just like, don't smooth it over. Just say, you know what, you're right. Your dad is XYZ, whatever that is. And let them know that you understand. Even if you can't resolve that for them, the simple act of validating their feelings is step one. Because as you probably know, narcissists invalidate their children and their partners and everybody else. So giving your kids validation, I think, is the key here to start with. I think beyond that, again, you know, talking with them about it, educating them, sharing things with them that can help them understand better. Like if you run across a video where they actually say something that helps your kids, or that sounds really familiar, that might feel that your kids might relate to, or something like that. Article, same thing. And just, you know, do your best to point out examples of healthy people, you know, but if they're adults, and you can only do what you can do. And then you can just go from there. So Dana, what are your thoughts about adult children?
Yeah, I think you're right, Angie, about, you know, they're adults and kind of knowing their limits. So I've seen this a lot. You probably have too, where parents, well, you know, again, I think when we all get to that point where we have this realization of, oh my gosh, I can see things clearly now, and I didn't realize how dysfunctional this relationship was, but I get it. I get it now, and I know what it means to be functional and to be healthy. And I see my kids kind of stuck in the mud of this dysfunction, and I just want the best for them. And how do I, or other family members that are stuck in the mud, how do I drag them out of the mud and get them to this place of peace in their life? And it's really challenging because, you know, if we're offering unwanted advice for people, it's just frustrating for us and annoying to them. So I think it's important to kind of realize, you know, are they even interested in this kind of stuff? And if not, then to back off. And at that point, some of the best things I think a person can do is to really make sure that relationship is there between you and your children. There's that unconditional positive regard for them, and then role modeling appropriate behavior. So you're role modeling healthy boundaries with them, and you know.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And Nikki Lee kind of just echoed, or actually she probably said it before we did. I was just scrolling through the chat and she kind of said the same thing. Love and validate their feelings. You know, love them and validate their feelings. Teach them about boundaries and self-love, and most importantly, make sure they know it had nothing to do with them. And all of that, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. You got one for us?
Yep, I sure do. This is from Monica, who says, how do you handle narcissistic family members, specifically a mother-in-law you can't get rid of, who continues to plot to hurt your feelings?
Ooh, gray rock, baby. If you can't go no contact with her, you can definitely lower the amount of contact by being boring. The gray rock thing. Don't react to any of her attempts to get you to, you know, if she tries to provoke you, which I'm sure she does, don't react, you know. So if, for example, if she says, you know, I don't know what all the issues are, but let me just think of an issue that I've had with someone in the past. For example, if she says, I don't like the way you dress your kids, or I think your kids don't go to a good enough school, or whatever, then you say, well, thanks for your opinion. I appreciate that, and let it go. You know, thanks for sharing that with me, or nothing. You know, you say, okay. You know, you don't give her any sort of negative reaction. You don't fight with her, argue with her. You just keep it cool. You minimize contact as much as you can. Don't volunteer to help her out with stuff. Only see her when you're forced to see her. And personally, I still think no contact is an option, personally, but that's between you and your husband. So what are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, you know, I guess it depends on the husband's involvement here too. I mean, ideally, it would be great. And I know culture can also be, you know, an impact on this as well, and expectations as far as culture and religion maybe factor into it. But, you know, ideally, if there's a damaging family member present, it would be fantastic if both spouses can be on the same page and realize, hey, you know what, we're not going to allow this. And so we need to really stand together as a unified front to keep dangerous and destructive people at bay. Because it's not only is she being rude to you, that impacts your marriage. It impacts, if you have children, it impacts your children. It impacts a lot of things. If there is no getting distance due to culture and religion and these kinds of things, then I would try to just do as much damage control as you can, and also realize her behavior. Whenever we're feeling hurt, so like you had mentioned that you have, she continually tries to hurt your feelings. Once you see her behavior as this is part of just her limitations,
Mm-hmm.
I really feel it's very much along the same lines as working with somebody who has Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive challenge present. Okay. So for example, when my grandmother had Alzheimer's and she lived with us, her behavior was very erratic, and she would say and do things that was not normal for her. And some of the things could be, and I've, worked with other people before, some of the things would be really hurtful, and there was no filter there. But what helped was to be able to realize this is, I can't take offense to this, because this is just kind of their limitations, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
talking. And it's the same thing with abusive people or personality disordered people, or actually just to say abusive people. When abusive people are being abusive, and that's when you realize you've hit their limitations of their emotional maturity. So they are here. And if you are up here and you're able, to moderate your behavior, you have open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, you're at just a very different level than them. And so the way to not get your feelings hurt is to adjust your expectations to meet reality. So instead of being around that person who is, let's say, has a brain injury, who has Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive, challenge going on, that you're not expecting them to remember your name, that you're not expecting them to be fully self-sufficient and doing everything that you would expect an otherwise healthy adult to be doing, right? You adjust your expectations. Okay, this is what I'm expecting. Their behavior is probably going to be erratic. They're probably going to need some help with hygiene and cooking and remembering things. And I'm probably going to have to say the same thing 40 different times and maybe write it down. And I'm going to have to adjust in order, and I can't get frustrated because you can get frustrated, but the frustration comes when our expectations are something other than reality.
Yes.
So when you realize this woman just is hateful and hurtful for whatever reasons, and there's no need, you don't need to take that in. You can just realize this woman is just hateful and hurtful, and just kind of tune down the volume on it and not take it personally.
100%. I agree. Absolutely. I have one from Lisa Romero here. And she says, can a normal, healthy person change into a narcissist later in life, like a midlife crisis? Social media was a platform he began to depend on. It was like watching a transformation. And I would say, yes, there is something called acquired situational narcissism, I think. And you see it with celebrities a lot. You see it with people who become famous or well-known, and I'm sure you can see with people in social media who kind of get popular on their sites or whatever with their people. I've seen it. And what happens is they might have seemed normal before, they might have been normal before, but now they're getting all this attention, and suddenly their opinion matters more or whatever. They might get bombarded with fans or depending on the situation. Of course, this can happen on any scale. What is popular really, it's all situational as to what we consider popularity. So if, let's say, he grew up in school and he was just kind of a nobody or a wallflower, or even if he was a popular kid in school, and now he's 50 years old and he's suddenly all over social media and he's getting all this attention, again, certainly it could acquired situational narcissism is a thing. Dana, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if you look at narcissism in two different ways, there's kind of more like the insecurity-based narcissism. You're just not feeling good enough. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people struggle with that kind of just low self-esteem. And that's where a lot of that grandiosity and arrogance and defensiveness comes from, because there's not, a healthy self at the core there. And you're right. Yeah. If you give, well, and here's the thing with anything, like with money, with attention, with fame, with any of this, it tends to make people more of what they already are. It doesn't change them. It just makes them more of what they already are. And so, and it can be difficult, because the way I can only imagine what it would be like for a celebrity, especially a young one, to have to be, to get all kinds of attention, or for that attention to stop, like child stars that peak when they're 8 and then nothing,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. I was just going to say, you and I can relate to this on some level, even though we're obviously not famous people, but we, both of us are inundated with messages, private messages and emails and things like that, from sweet people who just need help sometimes. Sometimes they're not nice people. Sometimes they're narcissists.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're just genuinely kind people looking for help, and we just can't possibly manage them all. And I know that I've had to, it's a lot, and I feel terrible that I can't possibly manage them all, but I can't, we would have to hire almost an entire team of people just to manage that one inbox. You know what I mean? It's difficult to do it. And so I know that on some, I know you lost sleep over it. I know I was under a great deal of stress about it for a long time, and I had to just come to terms with the fact that I couldn't help everyone. But just that on this small scale, I can see how it would become overwhelming for almost anyone on any level, depending on what they're used to having happen. So I guess my point is, I could see why any sort of notoriety or public like appearance, or not appearance, but public platform might make someone feel that way. This isn't completely related to that question. Go ahead.
And I think too that, so the other side to that, so like there's that insecure part of narcissism where, and then, it's weird whenever anybody's in a weird situation that they are not prepared for, like you're being thrust into any type of fame, or notoriety of any kind. It's weird. And there's this adjustment period where you have to it's a new role in your life. Like, and you have to kind of figure out what does this mean and who am I at this stage? But then there's also the part of narcissism, which is more of like the defensiveness.
Yeah.
And the self-absorption of, and this kind of stuff, I do think this absolutely can come from trauma and abuse. And I think it's a normal stage in healing too, but it can be easy to get stuck there, where a person has something really traumatic happen and then they just shut down, and then they kind of just bounce around from being numb to being depressed to being anxious to being avoidant to being very defensive to very self-absorbed. Because, it's sort of like if you have a broken leg, all you're focused on is that broken leg. Yeah. And it's very difficult to be present and to converse with other people about their day-to-day problems, even if they also have a broken leg. Yeah. It can be very difficult to see past your own pain, and we're all like that. So,
that's right.
So yes, and I think this is one of the reasons it is so important to find support groups and a good therapist or a life coach who can help a person process abuse and trauma, because it's very easy and understandable for a person to get stuck in there and then wonder, oh my gosh, am I the narcissist? Because I'm full of anger and rage, and I can't be present for anybody else, and I'm having trouble attaching to other people.
Yeah.
All
points. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So. Got one for us, or was it my turn? I can't.
I think it might be my turn.
Okay.
Okay, here's one. This is from Asha, who asks, well, what type of therapist should I seek? And I'll also include this with life coaches too. Frankly, I think it's easier with life coaches at this stage in the game, because there's more of the terminology surrounding narcissistic abuse that's being used, whereas that's not a term that's in the DSM. So you won't find too many therapists that are using that language. You want somebody that really understands emotional and psychological abuse and manipulation and healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll tell you something. Lise, one of my fellow coaches at Queen Being, is actually planning to do a live stream about this today. And later this afternoon, she's over on Live Makeover TV. But I have written articles about this and done videos about this. And basically, the way you find the therapist is you interview the therapist. If you want a coach, same thing if you want to, but a therapist in your local area that is covered by your insurance, there are therapists who do understand what you're dealing with, but you do have to kind of dig in and talk to them first. So you can ask them questions. Ask them, are they familiar with CPTSD? Ask them, are they familiar with NPD? And what is their experience with this? Do they know anyone with this? Whatever. I've got a whole list of questions at Queen Being, and I can't remember the name of the post right now, but if you just type in how to find a therapist, Angie Atkinson, or how to find a therapist, Queen Being, you'll find that article and see everything you need to know. But it is important to know ahead of time. And I know that, like coaching is generally not covered by your insurance. And so those people who want and need it to be covered by their insurance are going to have to find a therapist, and usually in their own area. So in that case, just talk to them first, or talk to a lot of times they'll let you do like an interview over the phone or even in person. I know several doctors have allowed me to interview them in person. They just basically made an appointment with me. Now, they may charge you a small fee for that depending on their availability. But even if they do, it might be worth it just to make sure you're not going to waste your time or theirs. So,
yeah.
Yep. All right. Nancy says, how can a person get out of a relationship when they own the home, but the narcissist doesn't? Everyone says to leave, but it's my home. I would evict them legally. I would go down to your local city hall or whatever it is, or look it up online for your state. What are the eviction procedures? A lot of times you have to give them a 90-day notice. And you're right. You shouldn't leave the home if you want to evict them. And I would just legally evict them if that's the only thing you can do. But outside of that, of course, asking them to leave is the first step. If they refuse, then you legally evict. Thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, I would get everything in writing. So when you ask them to leave, you want to put notice in writing. I err on the side of caution. If you own the home, I would go ahead and call your homeowner's insurance and get the maximum amount of coverage you can get, just to err on the side of caution in case they decide to destroy things. I would take pictures before, like that day before, with a time date stamp on a camera of the home. I would do a video tour of the outside and the inside without them knowing. You might even consider installing cameras. I would for sure, after they move out, for sure change the locks. If you have to go through an eviction process and they're fighting it, because if that is the case, it might be so incredibly stressful. I would encourage you to think about lining up some alternative housing for however, and I would contact the court and see how long does eviction take. I mean, it used to be in some states, it can take a long time. It can take years. Yep. So find out from your state. Michigan is on it. Like it happens a lot quicker here. But when I was in California, it was ridiculous. So finding out what is about the average time, because some days it's 30 days, for them to get out, and then the police can be there to help escort. I would definitely, if they're not out, I would have police do a civil standby, have other people there. Even I just would err on the side of caution. You're dealing with a person who's entitled and justified, and who's going to feel entitled and justified to act however they want to act, and who's probably not going to go away quietly. So just prepare yourself for that. Document everything.
Yeah, absolutely agree. 100%. And be careful. Keep yourself safe. Lock your bedroom door at night. Things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This is not the time. I really view ending a relationship with a narcissist is a lot like kicking a bee's nest. And you want to have a plan in place before you do this. Yeah. And it is really important that you understand this is not the time to expect appropriate behavior from them. So do not expect for them to handle it well, to be emotionally mature, to, expect an adult version of a temper tantrum. And if they don't give it to you, then be pleasantly surprised, but you don't want to have that happen and then be completely knocked off balance and then so overwhelmed and stressed that you can't respond to that effectively.
Right. And having, if you have it, the ability to have like other people there with you when you do the thing, and you have like the police or a friend for support, whether they're capable of doing anything to the narcissist or not is irrelevant. You need that emotional support. It's helpful because you're less likely to sort of go, okay, fine, just stay. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And that's what a lot of times what they're banking on is wearing you down.
Yeah.
So just realize kind of what you're going in for. I like Angie's idea, getting support, kind of circling your wagons and then moving forward.
Yep. So. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Do you have one for us?
I do not, but I have to go here in about 5 minutes. So let's.
Yep, me too. Okay. All right. Well, we'll do this last one here and then we will wrap it up for today. But just so you guys know, before we do that, Dana and I do this normally every Tuesday and we alternate channels. We were kind of out of commission for a little while, but I think we're back. So next week we'll be over on Dana's channel, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Thrive After Abuse right here on YouTube and thriveafterabuse.com, Thrive After Abuse on Facebook, Twitter, everything else. Make sure you're subscribed to both of us so you can get notifications when we do these live streams. Okay. Question is, can they want to be pushed to change for someone they love or to get someone they love so obsessively and desperately? Of course they can want it. Of course they might even seem like they really do want it. And I've seen that a lot. In fact, the only time I've ever seen a narcissist do any sort of change that actually appeared to be real change was in the name of love, right? Or money. Either way. But what I have seen in both of those cases, especially in the case of love, is that their love is very much like a cell phone, right? I'm gonna just, so for example, or like a kid with a new toy. When a kid, like I used to really want these Cabbage Patch Kids when I was a kid. I wanted them so bad I could taste them almost, and they're little smelled like powder, and they had a birth certificate. It was so cool. And for a while, my mother was unable to obtain one because they were just sold out. And so she ended up paying somebody from some other place to buy them for us. And so we were supposed to get them at Christmas. We didn't get them at Christmas. And so we were all disappointed. And it was until like March that we got them. And so all of this time I was coveting a Cabbage Patch Kid. And when it finally did show up, I was like, yay. Okay, so it's this, or when you get a cell phone, we have a brand new cell phone. It's awesome. It's fast. It's speedy. You love that cell phone. And you're like, this is the best one I've ever had. And then like 3 years later, 2 years later, a year, depending on how quickly you go, you find out that phone kind of slows down. It doesn't work as well. It's kind of laggy and draggy. And then you're like, I don't like this phone anymore. It's the same thing. That's how narcissists feel about love almost. It's an example of it. So they love us in that same way. So like when we're new and shiny, or when we're something that they can't have because we've left them or whatever, now suddenly they need us, just like I needed that Cabbage Patch Kid. But once I got the Cabbage Patch Kid, I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay, well, anyway, next. And that's the same kind of thing. Once they get us and they know that they have us and their changes worked, slowly or quickly, depending on them and their situation, they will revert and go back to their old behaviors. It's just unfortunately what I've seen in every situation. What about you, Dana?
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between acting the part and truly changing, right? And we all do this. So when we're faced with consequences, we all are like, oh, we kind of act on our best behavior, and we might even be tricking ourselves into thinking that we've changed, but then change is not easy, and it's not fast, and it oftentimes involves a lot of false starts. This is why it's so important for people to get clear on where their boundaries are, because it's very easy for a person that fear of loss. Oh, this relationship's going to end. I'm going to get fired. My kids aren't going to talk to me, whatever might happen, for them to act differently, but they can't maintain it because that change isn't fully made. And it requires a plan in order to change. It requires taking action towards that. It requires self-reflection. What did I do? What's working? What's not working? Why? What can I adjust? But most of all, it requires a person experiencing pain from their actions. And if a person doesn't experience pain, true pain, not just a immature, like, I want this relationship because I want this relationship, or because it's mine, which tends to be the emotional maturity of a narcissist. It's about power and control. It's not about this deep level of attachment and commitment and the depth of that. It's just, I want it because I can't have it, or I want it because I'm threatened that I'm going to lose it. It's not the same thing. So you might see them with the next person and think, oh my goodness, now they've actually changed. But what you're really seeing is the idealized stage with the next person.
Yep. Oh,
yeah, they're on their best behavior. It's just like a job interview, like you get this person acts the part, right? We all do this to some extent, right? Like they're on their best behavior, then they settle in and you see kind of more of the real them. And if they're awful, maybe they get fired or what happens. And then you see, maybe you run into the next person. Oh, they just hired this wonderful new person. And then you realize it's the same awful person that was at your office. And then you just think to yourself, oh, well, just wait. Like, yeah, they seem great now. They seemed great here too for the first 6 weeks or 3 months. But,
Yep, absolutely. Yep. I want to say thanks to our moderators today and to our channel members. I appreciate all of you.
Yes.
Jen, James, I see question everything in the chat today. And thanks to everybody for being here and being part of our little spanily. Dana, as always, I love chatting with you. I'm so glad that you are back, and we will chat very soon. Any last words for everybody before we wrap up for the day?
Just, I guess, keep moving in the direction of what brings you peace in your life.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. And Dana, hopefully I'll talk to you sooner than that.
Okay. Yes.
All right?
Yes, for sure.
Right.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Have a good one.